What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Today I'm having a quick look over the Kola map, and I have been waiting patiently an eternity for this map. I believe this is the most important map we have ever had in DCS because it opens up opportunities for Russia versus the West, either in the Cold War or the present day, that we have never had before, and it also opens up an opportunity for us to fly our Vigans finally in their natural habitat. Although, disclaimer, currently the Kola map does not feature any Swedish bases where Vigans could be based, and therefore we might have to wait a little bit longer before we can finally realize our Vigan missions. I also happen to have come from Karelia in Russia, which is part of the region that is depicted in the Kola Peninsula map. However, the part where I come from is a little bit further south than where the map cuts off. However, the scenery there is pretty much almost identical or very similar, so I have a very good idea of what it should look like, so I thought I would be fairly qualified in giving my opinion. And as you'll probably tell from the video very shortly, I have some disappointments with the Kola map. However, I do want to make it abundantly clear that before I get into my ramblings about some of the stuff that I dislike, that I am still fairly positive. I think it has some severe limitations, some of which are due to the DCS engine itself. However, I do believe there are things that Orbx could have done better too, and fingers crossed that they will improve it in the future. And I really am very positive about the map overall, so please don't take my ramblings out of context. So with that said, let's get into it.
We have 2 good engine starts. You're clear to disconnect the headset. We'll see you on the left with the pin. Thanks a lot.
Alright, so let's start with Monchegorsk. This is one of the 4 air bases here on the Kola Peninsula in Russia. And when I first saw this, I swear I immediately thought this was an air base somewhere in Norway, because there are no Russian fields which look like this. This is ridiculous. I mean, this could be the Netherlands, maybe. Could be Norway, but it definitely does not look like Russia from these fields, which is a shame, because if we compare it to Google Maps, as you can tell, although the image has been taken during the winter, these very fields here, which are supposed to be here, they are all a little bit irregular, all a little bit kind of, you know, not entirely symmetrical, and that's kind of just a general theme throughout, you know, stuff in Russia. When it comes to the airbase itself, I have to say I am deeply disappointed with just some of the lack of attention to detail and some of the incompleteness of the terrain here. So, for example, you can see in front of us, there is a bunch of buildings here just stuck on the grass. Now, if I show you what it's like on the map in real life, you'll see that there's a whole bunch of really interesting little details, and obviously there's paths and little concrete walkways and roads and whatever in and around the buildings. You have a whole bunch of different equipment that they could have put in, you know, a whole bunch of cool Russian stuff, trucks, GPUs, maybe some other generators and whatnot. One of my biggest gripes is that Orbx have not managed to accurately replicate the textures of a Russian base when it comes to the tarmac. As you'll probably see in a lot of photos that I'll show you now, that, you know, these should be very nitty gritty. The tiles should be, you know, have all sorts of different kind of shapes and tar in between them. They should be inconsistent. They should have a lot of different discoloration, weathering, and so on and so forth. And one of the things about Russian bases is they generally have orangey or a red markers along the side of the runways, these marker boards, which are also completely missing. There's a lot of places like this with tarmac textures which are just very uniform and kind of plasticky looking. I don't really like it. It just should be full of different crap and cracks, bits of, you know, concrete that are either missing or broken or something like that. Generally, when it comes to cities, I think they've done a pretty good job overall. I think these, especially Russian and Soviet looking blocks and buildings, they look really, really good. Whenever there's populated areas on this map, in general, I can tell you everything looks really good, no matter whether it's a Russian town or whether it's a Norwegian town or whether it's a Finnish town. In general, they've done a really, really, really good job, except when it comes to industrial areas. Now, this is next to Monchegorsk. This should be a very nitty-gritty Russian industrial site, and as you can see, it just looks nothing like it here in DCS. It's all very clean, tidy, beautiful. It's white. It just makes no sense. When it comes to textures around the map in general, you'll find that there's a lot of this kind of shadows which are just painted on because of, you know, satellite imagery. I'm really not a fan of that whatsoever. I think the Caucasus map is still by far the best when it comes to the integration of textures and vegetation and how cohesive everything feels. In my opinion, the Caucasus map wins in a lot of areas when it comes to just general low-level flying. Now here we are in Olenegorsk, and it's a similar problem here. I feel like this is really unfinished. I think there's a lot of places here which just like, for example, where these buildings are just stuck in the middle of the grass there. You'll see in real life again, there's lots of details, lots of equipment, lots of scattered Russian just airbase crap lying around, which could give it a lot of that kind of Soviet Russian character, and I really feel like Orbx has missed out big time on it. And around here, for example, this is like a storage place for Tu-22 bombers, I think, and again, they could have just done like a low polygon model of a Tu-22, stuck a whole bunch of them out there, you know, which I'm surprised they haven't, because when it comes to the ports, they've made them look really alive with a whole different bunch of ships and even naval vessels. So I don't really understand why they couldn't have done something like that for the air bases. And again, my absolute biggest gripe is when you go and have a look at the textures of these tiles here for the tarmac, for the taxiways, for just the aprons and everything. It is crazy that they've just not, you know, tried to replicate that nitty-gritty Russian tiles, and that's why the Russian aircraft have, you know, really crazy beefed up landing gear, because, you know, they're dealing with really imperfect tarmac. Whereas here, I mean, we might as well be in Sweden, because this just looks perfect. When it comes to Severomorsk 3, this is probably one of my kind of biggest disappointments when it comes to Russian bases in, you know, this map. Is, first of all, you can see around here just how ridiculous it is that these buildings are just stuck kind of in the middle of nowhere in this grass, whereas of course in real life, again, it's just got such a different feel that I'm very surprised they've done it. Now, they've also stuck a really giant big building here that looks like it belongs to from a factory out here. And if you check this place on Google Maps, you'll see that, looking at the shadows there, it should be some kind of small building, but definitely not this sort of giant factory, whatever it is, which looks very strange. But by far the worst one is this one. This looks like an apartment block just built right next to the runway. And I mean, it looks absolutely ridiculous when you're flying down this approach. Now, I could tell you where it comes from in real life. In real life, this appears to be maybe a radar site or a SAM site, and I'm not really sure why they've interpreted this, as it was obviously hand-placed, this building. I don't really understand why they've interpreted it to be some kind of blocky, big apartment building. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not really annoyed at the fact that they haven't replicated everything one-to-one, and they don't, you know, if it's a radar site and they haven't put it in there, okay, whatever. It's not really a big deal for me. But it is a big deal when they stick something that isn't supposed to be there, which is so obvious. As well, I've noticed some texture issues. Like these are supposed to be obviously these white squares marking the parking positions. Also, very peculiar detail in this spot is that you will notice that we have these bombs which have, you know, English writing on them in a Russian base apparently. This GPU card, I'm not convinced that that's a Russian GPU card. Then we have a Scania truck sitting here with number plates which are clearly nothing to do with a Russian airbase as well. And, you know, I know these are tiny details, but my point is, you know, they should have and could have populated this with a whole bunch of Russian equipment, Russian KAMAZ trucks, Russian gas trucks, Russian everything, you know, just there's so much Soviet-y Russian tech stuff that they could have put in here to make it look authentic-y. Now, as you can see, like these tiles that they've used for, you know, the concrete, they look pretty good from up high. Once you get down here, again, it's just like literal perfection. It's like a Swede and a German, you know, had a kind of a day out together and lay these down. Okay, so there are some better places here. You can see they put some like oil patches in some of these bits, and don't get me wrong, this is a lot better. This is definitely an improvement. But in general, I just feel like they've missed out on a great opportunity to make the base look a little bit more authentic-y. Now, if we have a look just to the east of Severomorsk 3 base, we'll see that, the vegetation is probably my biggest gripe with the whole map. It's just they've taken kind of the same type of tree, more or less, and then they've painted it a different color, and then they've scattered them around randomly in a sort of similar pattern. It looks quite motley, it looks quite vivid, and it isn't like real life. In real life, you have patches in these trees. They're darker in some areas, and then you have a patch of trees which are a bit lighter. All right, so I'm here in Microsoft Flight Simulator just for a very, very quick comparison. Severomorsk 3 is the airbase just behind the F-18 there, so pretty similar location. What really makes a huge difference is the vegetation. As you could tell, first of all, there's no gaps between the trees, which makes it, far more realistic. But also, as you can tell, unlike the very motley different types of colors of trees bunched together randomly in DCS, we have actual patches of dark and lightened sort of areas within the vegetation. And everything blends in. Because the vegetation blends into the textures below them, it makes it look pretty decent. Yeah, I don't understand why Orbx couldn't have done a slightly better job. There should be more coniferous trees as well. Now, admittedly, when it comes to cities and towns, like I mentioned before, they have done a fantastic job. And even with these ports, they've really breathed a bit of life into them because they have all these different types of ships and tankers populating the whole place. And I don't understand why they couldn't have just transferred that same logic towards, creating air bases and airfields, because I think they're lacking a little bit. These buildings, the Soviet blocks and stuff like that, I mean, it just looks brilliant. And all the detail here around the ports, this is probably some of the best ports we've ever had in any map in DCS. This is the port in Murmansk, and if you go a little bit further out, you'll see there's submarines and different, dry docks, and there's a lot of really, really cool stuff. Look how cool this is. This is like naval vessels there. There's tankers. And also in terms of performance, I have to say, unlike, say, the South Atlantic map, where I have some similar complaints about textures, trees, and so on and so forth, where my performance tanks if I was to fly in any location like this with a little bit of, buildings and objects and stuff. In South Atlantic, which by the way, I really dislike that map in general, my performance absolutely tanks, and here no problem. I'm running everything on absolutely the highest settings that I usually run every map on, with the exception of Marianas, where I just lower the shadows down to low. But in terms of the city and everything here, just in general, when it comes to town cities, Orbx have done a brilliant job, and the ports are absolutely excellent. Okay, now we come to perhaps my biggest disappointment with the Kola map, which I was hoping will be the biggest selling point of this map, which is finally we have road bases. Now, we do only currently have one road base. I think they're planning on adding more road bases in the future. But look at these textures. This is ridiculous. I'm sorry to say, but though this is not Russia, this is Finland, they actually look after their roads pretty well. I mean, so in reality, this place looks like this. And as you could tell, this has real character. It's got cracks. It's got, different color tarmac here, some discoloration. It's got a sign there. But in DCS, we are met with some kind of ridiculous texture for the tarmac. And this is a recurring theme on all the air bases too. I think they need to completely redo the tarmac textures because they don't look realistic. This just kind of looks like plastic. I wish they really redid this part, which is a shame because obviously, operating on a road base would be some of the, one of the coolest things ever in DCS. But at the moment, I just can't say that I would be willing or keen to operate out of this because it just looks kind of silly. Real shame. Now we come to Rovaniemi, which is probably butchering that. That's one of the Finnish bases. And finally, this is where Orbx really started to pull their own weight, because here they have really done a really good job. So first of all, you'll notice like there's a lot more ground equipment, which makes a lot of sense. You got these tow bars. Just in general, things look like they belong. Look at these coniferous trees. Finally, how cool does this look? This looks excellent. Looks much better. The actual textures on the ground here with a lot more of that kind of sandy gray gravel sort of feel just looks way better. And then they have this location, which I've got no idea what the hell this is. Like a compass swing place, or I'm not sure. But anyway, again, they've got the same problem with these damn textures just being too kind of like unrealistic looking, but in general, and I mean even just here, look, there's bits of bits and bobs lying around. Everything just looks better, much better, and the trees as well. And now we come to Bodo, which is an airbase in Norway, and this is probably one of the best modeled places in the entire map at the moment. First of all, the town and city looks so cram full of little bits and details, and you know, every building has a little path to it. You know, you got all these cars everywhere. The airbase looks really good. These islands look pretty decent. The only thing I'd say is all the hangars inside, they look rubbish, weird, and not very detailed and low resolution. So I think that's something they can improve on. You know, it's something the Syria and the Sinai map do, you know, phenomenally well, of course. But in general, I have to say, this is looking really nice. Really nice. There's very little to complain about. So one thing I was really surprised about, which very pleasantly surprised, are these mountains. I think they've done a really good job in, you know, making them look really kind of sort of relatively detailed. This is just next to Bodo in Norway. The mountains look quite realistic, I would say. Now, when you go further out from Bodo and into some of the wilderness out there, they don't look quite as detailed at the moment because they haven't really modeled that. They haven't really concentrated on that part of the map. But I have to say, like at this level, if you're flying around, you know, so we're at about, you know, 3,000 something feet. The map looks really decent, really good. But once you start to fly low level, I think in my opinion, it really starts to break down a little bit. Again, it's the same as the South Atlantic map. Again, look at these mountains and these mountain peaks. I'm really pleasantly surprised because this looks not bad at all. This is pretty good. And out there in the distance, it's just right. Everything, the texturing, and although there might be satellite imagery and some of the shadows are painted on, from this level here, really pleasant, really cool. However, I will show you what I am kind of disappointed about. I think a lot of us really wish that a map like this with a lot of coniferous forests and lakes and stuff would be amazing to fly, you know, properly low level, like skim the tree low level. And this is where it starts to break down. So you can see as we get lower to the ground, the shadows painted onto this island here look, well, kind of meh, you know. And again, if we go treetop level, just the way the water meets the land and everything, it just, this is where it starts to look, in my opinion, it's lacking. I think the Caucasus map for me is by far the best map to fly low level. I think everything blends in really well, and although it isn't using satellite imagery, especially with Bartek's Caucasus redone, but that texture mod, everything just kind of makes sense and blends in really well. And I'm not convinced that everything blends in super well here, you know, with the trees like I mentioned before. And again, like this line here, like look at that, that's just such a weird transition between trees and mountaintops. It's stuff like this that kind of, whereas here the towns and cities look great. That's something they've done a great job on. Overall, what can I tell you? Well, am I disappointed about buying the map? No, hell no. You know, I am. It's got great potential. I really hope that they keep working with Eagle Dynamics. I'm sure they will. Orbx, they've said that already. They're going to try and increase the file size for the textures. Currently, I think that's a limitation. You know, keep making it better. They'll add all the other textures, details, and everything. The mountains. If there's one thing I wish they could transfer straight out of Microsoft Flight Simulator and put it straight into DCS, that is definitely the vegetation in the forest, because that is a limitation in my opinion. If you are considering buying this, there is a whole bunch of detail. Everything in the middle here is very low res. There's no cities, no towns, nothing. It's just kind of nothing. Because obviously we need to get the Swedish bases in and some improvements to the Russian bases, and then I think it has potential. I think this map really does have potential to become really good. So I will back Orbx, and I'm still very glad that I bought the map despite my ramblings about some of the details. So please don't take that out of context. I am still very grateful for the fact that we have the Kola map finally in the game, giving us another place to play around. So with that said, folks, hopefully you've enjoyed it. Please make sure to subscribe for future videos, comment down below, and hopefully I'll catch you in the next video. Adios.